I've been wanting to share some of the small insights I've gotten from yoga philosophy because I believe that whether you're a yogi or not, there's a lot of wisdom in it that many of us could turn to or learn from if we want to be more at peace, more joyful in our lives. That said, it's thousands of years of Indian wisdom, yogic wisdom, that I'm condensing into a brief video. So it's not exactly exhaustive, of course, but more of an introduction. If you're not a yogi, you might find it overwhelming. If you are a yogi, you might find it lacking. I've tried to navigate that narrow stretch in between, knowing that it's probably not really possible. I chose to let the visual background be scenes from my garden and from nature, a little stretch of forest nearby that I sometimes cycle through or walk through, because I felt that the inevitable cycle of nature aligns well with the aspect of acceptance in yoga philosophy. And also it's my favorite season, so I thought, why not? I hope you'll just take from it whatever feels right for you right now and let the rest be. And maybe just if there's one or two small insights that you gain from it, that's fine. If not, maybe you can just enjoy the images of the Danish spring. When I decided to study to become a yoga teacher 2 years ago, it was out of a vague but long-standing practice of an interest in yoga, based on a very general understanding of it, which I know now was extremely limited. This limited view of yoga, encompassing mainly the asanas, the various poses, plus a relaxation practice, is how yoga is generally viewed in much of the world today, especially in the West. What I encountered during my yoga teacher training was a philosophical foundation that I immediately felt drawn to. It chimed with much of the spiritual reading I'd done over the years, and is not surprisingly sometimes called the first psychology. I could connect it to things I'd read about within Buddhism, in the works of Eckhart Tolle, the Stoics, in A Course in Miracles, and many others. This to me is where true wisdom lies. It joins rather than separates. It's ancient and universal because people have always struggled with the same things, regardless of where they've lived or the times they've lived in, namely to belong and connect with others, to reside more in love than in fear, to be true to themselves, to feel inner peace. Although my teacher training is finished, I can't call this video what yoga philosophy has taught me, because it's a lifelong project and will never finish. Walking the path is the path, but I wanted to share a little corner of it in a combination of Sanskrit and layman's terms, and describe some of the key concepts and how I, or we, can understand them and perhaps practice them. It can become a way of being in the world, which goes far beyond what you do or don't do on your yoga mat. Hatha yoga is traditionally seen as an approach towards liberation, or moksha, that is, freeing the mind from thoughts, expectations, attachments, all the small negative ego-based thoughts that lead to suffering, or dukkha, and therefore lack of freedom. That doesn't mean we don't feel pain. In fact, part of the yogic beliefs is that pain is inevitable. It's a part of life, but we can try to avoid embellishing our pain by creating stories about it, which turns it into suffering, dukkha. This also includes disappointment, anger, depression, worrying, etc. All suffering stems from fear, and it occurs when we believe we're the only ones to feel a certain way, or we compare our lot in life with that of others, or get caught up in thought patterns of fear, distrust, or victimhood in connection with that pain. Above all, suffering occurs when we feel resistance to what is. That resistance stems from attachment to a certain idea of what our lives should be, and when life doesn't meet our expectations, we feel disappointment and suffering. Instead, we can learn to feel a sense of liberation if we can lean into what life offers us with detachment. Resistance won't change anything anyway. Like pain, change is a constant part of life, yet many of us resist change, even though resistance doesn't make changes go away either. Resistance always creates more suffering. Instead, our task is to accept the pain as part of the human predicament, and know that we all feel pain from time to time. If someone appears to go through less pain than you, maybe that's an illusion, or maybe it's part of their karma and it has nothing to do with you. As in the practice of the asanas, the physical yoga postures, we need to concentrate on what we do on our own mat, not what others do on theirs. If you truly are a victim of some sort, of course you need to address that and get help. But even in that case, you still need at some point to reinstall a sense of empowerment in your life. Yoga offers one way of doing that by using our bodies to quieten our minds. But yoga philosophy too can offer some guidance. The word yoga is linked to the English word yoke and means to join or unite, the individual and the universe, or God, the body and the mind, yin and yang. It's connection and oneness, rather than separation and duality. The man who first collected texts about yoga from the ancient Indian Vedas was Patanjali, who lived in the 4th century AD. In his seminal text, Yoga Sutras, he describes the 8 limbs of yoga, 8 key concepts upon which everything else rests. The 8 limbs are connected and form a sort of ladder or progression, so that you ideally move from one to the next, all with the purpose of quieting the mind, the foremost purpose of yoga, according to Patanjali. 1. Yama. Yamas are considered the most important aspects of the 8 limbs and are universal ethical or moral codes of conduct, practiced in the external world. If we don't respect the yamas, we will create bad karma for ourselves. That is, we will live unconsciously or automatically, and sow seeds of negativity, judgment, greed, etc., that harm both ourselves and others, and which we will be challenged by again and again, until we reach a state of awareness where we can overcome these patterns. The yamas are divided into subcategories, along with the niyamas, which come next, and are what might be called the 10 commandments of yoga. They are ahimsa, or non-violence, in thought, speech, and deed, the guiding principle that Mahatma Gandhi lived by. Satya, or truth, meaning the truth, not individual truths which differ. Asteya, or non-stealing, including other people's time by arriving late, or by surrounding yourself with people who steal or drain your energy. Brahmacharya, moderation, in all aspects of life, be it food, physical activity, commitments, possessions, which in a modern context might be part of a simple living concept, but again also conserving your energy for what is most valuable instead of scattering it. And finally, aparigraha, non-greed, that is, not amassing more than you need, and not overly striving towards something you don't have, sometimes referred to as the happiness advantage of yoga, the yogic version of an abundance perspective. The happier you are in the moment, the more abundance will flow your way. My yoga teacher pointed out that this is what Jesus meant when he said, "For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them." This seemingly unfair and paradoxical statement means that it matters what you send out into the world. Do you experience life from a place of abundance or a place of lack? Yamas are thus about disciplining the human tendencies towards judging ourselves and others, wanting more than we need, creating false illusions, and instead cultivating love and compassion. 2. Niyama. Niyamas comprise self-discipline and codes of conduct that point more inward, and can also be divided into subcategories. Saucha, purity or cleanliness. Santosha, which means contentment, a major challenge for many of us in today's world, regardless of our life situation. It has less to do with our external circumstances and more to do with our state of mind, and this we can work on. Then we have tapas, enthusiasm or ascetic practice, svadhyaya, studies of the self and of scriptures, and ishvara pranidhana, devotional practice. Niyamas are overall about practicing purity in body and mind, creating balance and feeling contentment, also by practicing viveka or viveka, which is the ability of discernment. What is true? What is false? When is something we hear actual knowledge? And when is it someone's opinion, which may be skewed and based on their limited perspective, known as avidya, which means ignorance or incorrect understanding. Viveka is a crucial concept and entails the ability to pause in any given situation and, instead of reacting automatically with our old behaviors, asking ourselves if we're seeing the full picture. Only then can we live in harmony with life, with what is. One of the major revelations for me, which I know to be true, is that according to yoga philosophy, you can feel pain or sorrow in one area of your life and still feel santosha, contentment, in other areas. One doesn't exclude the other. Just like light and dark aren't opposites but form part of a whole, as long as you accept that pain or sorrow. In fact, if you objectively have even the slightest thing to feel content about but are focusing more on something that gives you pain, giving it momentum, so to speak, you're creating more dukkha for yourself. You're turning pain into suffering. Another challenge to feeling santosha, contentment, is when we have a strong desire for something, or trishna, which means longing or thirst. We believe that if we can just get this one thing, or situation, or person, we will be happy. Yoga philosophy tells us that this means we are at core dissatisfied. And if we achieve this one thing, it will only make us happy for a while, before we move on to focusing on something else, in the future, outside of ourselves. That doesn't mean we can't have goals or dreams, but that we shouldn't be attached to attaining them. Non-attachment, or vairagya, is key in this connection and in yoga overall. Only by letting go of, that is, not feeling attached to or identified with, our roles, identities, feelings, people, goals, and beliefs in how things should be, can we be truly free and happy. That's a tall order for most of us, because it means relinquishing control, or the idea that we have any control in the first place, which is again fear-based, and instead trying to cultivate trust, surrender and acceptance, which lead to sukha, or happiness, joy, well-being. Nor does it mean that we shouldn't feel committed to our various goals, jobs, or yoga practice. We don't arrive at much without some effort and perseverance, or abhyasa. But it should never be with a specific outcome in mind. Again, walking the path is the path, by engaging in things with an open mind and open heart, instead of clinging to what we want out of them. Practicing non-attachment means trying to be aware of and let go of preferences, but also aversions, which are just another form of attachment. And behind all our attachments and aversions are mental projections and false perceptions. Ideally, our activities and engagements should be in harmony with reality. That is, we accept what is, as a kind of devotion where the ego falls in the background. Then our life is aligned with our dharma, our truest calling, where we serve others by playing our true role, which brings a sense of joy and alignment to both ourselves and others. 3. Asana. Asana comprised the physical poses and were originally only meditation poses. The body is seen as a vehicle for the spirit, in that through the physical practice, we can free ourselves not only from physical ailments, but also mental distractions. Through frequent and profound practice, we can learn to quiet the mind and experience a sense of alignment. in body, mind, and spirit, knowing that they're all connected. 4. Pranayama. Pranayama is breath work, breathing techniques, and working with energy or prana. We can learn to calm our nervous system and learn to move with the flow of the practice through conscious breathing. As the breath is seen as the link between the body and the mind, we can experience a deeper sense of connection between them. We might then take this practice with us off the mat to learn to go with the flow in all things in life. 5. Pratyahara. Pratyahara is withdrawing our senses so that our thoughts are no longer preoccupied with everything in the external world. For instance, we usually close our eyes in the final relaxation to guide our attention inward, to our body and our breath, a sense of presence. It also means not letting ourselves become distracted or even annoyed by, for instance, sounds that seem to interrupt our practice, and instead trying to let them be, understanding that they have nothing to do with us. This is sometimes difficult for me as I'm extremely sensitive to sounds. Not white noise, which is fine, but sudden footsteps when lying down in Shavasana, or a droning radio somewhere. I love the quiet, so I often have to remind myself that noises aren't personal. They haven't been sent my way in order to annoy me. If I can't remove myself from them, I try to practice acceptance, or at least recognize that I'm feeling resistance. In today's world, practicing pratyahara might be considered even more important, given that we're constantly bombarded with external distractions. To truly get to know ourselves or feel a sense of inner peace, it's vital that we turn off that stream of distractions sometimes. Number 6. Dharana. Dharana is the ability to focus or concentrate, which can be linked to the ability to draw our senses away from distractions in the outer world, a necessary skill for the next step. Number 7. Dhyana or dhyana. Dhyana is meditation. Sitting still for 20 minutes once or twice a day, for example, is an essential part of yoga. Over time, it makes you less reactive, more balanced and patient, to name but a few benefits I've experienced. In yoga philosophy, it's a tool for overcoming kleshas, literally poison, which are 5 mental states that are the cause of all our suffering. They are avidya, ignorance; asmita, egoism; raga, attachment; dvesha, aversion; and abhinivesha, fear of death. Number 8. Samadhi. Samadhi, the final step, is similar to nirvana, a state of universal consciousness, enlightenment or bliss, where the individual feels at one with the universe and with everyone and everything in it. It's the transcendence of the ego. A worthy goal to try to move towards, but probably only attainable sporadically for most of us. If we reach this stage of awakening, which is free of attachments, judgments, and desires, we can achieve moksha, the ultimate liberation and freedom from samsara, or rebirth. Our karmic seeds, samskaras, have then been resolved. Yoga philosophy can thus be a framework for self-development through self-awareness, not by becoming overly focused on the self, but rather less obsessed with the self. Less ego, more presence. Presence without judgment. It can be both a spiritual practice towards enlightenment and or a more therapeutic practice for better physical and mental health. They don't have to be opposites. It's important to underline that we shouldn't feel guilty about not being in an exalted state of bliss or close to the state of samadhi or enlightenment. That would just be another ego-based judgment of not enoughness. Nor should we strive too ardently for enlightenment, as that too would be with a specific outcome in mind. Instead, we can try to create more acceptance and awareness of our own patterns, of what it means to be a human, and be more mindful of our thoughts, for example, when we inadvertently judge ourselves and others. Changing our automatic patterns is not easy. Our beliefs have been installed in us throughout our upbringing and are often entirely unconscious. Some of them are good if we've been taught to be kind to others, or more indirectly, if we've seen a parent relate easily and openly to others, then it might be easier for us to make friends. But many beliefs and convictions are limiting and can turn into obstacles in our lives, kleshas. Overcoming them requires that we continually take the meta perspective and become neutral observers of ourselves, which requires patience and compassion. And we can try to remember that our sense of contentment is directly linked to our ability to be present in the now with what is.